Welcome. This webinar is being sponsored by the TDM Web Academy online business training portal. The TDM Web Academy is a network of sponsoring business partners collaborating to present online training for startup, micro, emerging, and existing small business entrepreneurs, as well as nonprofit organizations seeking greater effectiveness and sustainability. Our sponsoring business partners include North Carolina Entrepreneurial Business Resource Center, QRQ Enterprises Incorporated, TDM Business Tool Suite, and Virginia Entrepreneurial Business Resource Center. Please note that the design and content materials of this webinar have been developed and copyrighted by TDM Business Tool Suite. Permission is not given to reproduce this webinar for any purpose. The webinar presented today is Z004, Nonprofit Capacity Building Primer. This is one in a series of webinars that are part of our Nonprofit Capacity Building curriculum, which is designed to provide nonprofit organizations with the tools necessary to increase the organization's sustainability and effectiveness. Z004, Nonprofit Capacity Building Primer, is an introductory webinar that highlights the fundamentals involved in building the capabilities of a nonprofit organization. This includes understanding three core concepts: 1. Capacity building, 2. The capacity building framework, and 3. Defining a capacity building strategy. Many nonprofit organizations are more focused on survival than trying to determine the most effective approach that will allow their organization to be successful. The traditional approach has been to have nonprofit organizations focus on goals, objectives, and resources necessary to grow and sustain their organization. A more modern and comprehensive approach is for nonprofit organizations to focus on building their capacities to grow and sustain their organization. A wealth of literature as well as funding is available to help nonprofit organizations build the capacity of their organization. This webinar is an introduction presentation for the startup or emerging nonprofit organization interested in learning the key elements of building their organization's capabilities or to carry out their mission more effectively. As such, our presentation of the fundamentals of the nonprofit capacity building concept is presented by covering three key topics. What does capacity building mean? The capacity building framework. Steps in defining a capacity building strategy. So let's begin with our first topic. What does capacity building mean? The concept of capacity building first came about in the 1990s, when the Nations Conference on Environment and Development observed that institutions lack competency to resolve problems and develop organizations. As a result, the term capacity building came about to address three dimensions. 1. Human capacity, which encompasses the development of education and training of individuals in the use and development of products and services. 2. Organizational capacity, refers to the development of organizational policies, procedures, programs, and structure to ensure effectiveness and enhancement of products or services. 3. Infrastructure capacity. This is related to the way in which an organization accesses, uses, and develops their products and services, such as in technology and facilities. Today, the discussion of nonprofit capacity building is moving to the forefront for most nonprofits and funding organizations wanting to embrace the ideal of enhancing the abilities of the organization's stakeholders so that they can evaluate the effectiveness and viability of the organization. For purposes of this presentation and future webinars on this subject, our focus will be on capacity building, which we have previously defined as a planned comprehensive effort to increase an organization's effectiveness and viability. The effectiveness of an organization refers to the measure of how well or even whether or not an organization is doing the right things to accomplish its purpose. The viability of an organization can be defined as the ability of an organization to survive or sustain itself over a period of time, hopefully a long period of time. In essence, we see the term capacity building not as a new concept, but as a refinement of previous approaches combined to address different aspects of an organization to ensure effectiveness and viability. Addressing an organization's capacity means committing to the long-term examination of different aspects of the organization. This means that all aspects of the organization that will influence performance should be examined and includes the organization resources, structure, relationships, processes and procedures, and culture. At the heart of capacity building are resources and activities designed to advance an organization's ability to deliver programs, as well as adapt, expand, and innovate. Following are the key elements that serve as a focal point in an analysis of nonprofit resources and activities that will strengthen and enhance available resources for long-term viability. So let's explore this framework in more detail. Conceptually, the capacity building framework identifies key aspects of the organization that is needed to be analyzed in order to identify what is required to reach sustainability, which include purpose. We speak of organization purpose as the organization's desired achievement, represented by the vision, mission, goals, and objectives, which is supported by a clear and concise vision and mission that articulates the organization purpose, measurable goals and objectives to achieve the vision and mission, an operating work plan with steps and a timeline that defines what the organization will do over a set period of time. Periodic evaluation to determine whether the vision, mission, goals, and objectives are being met and to make adjustments to ensure that they are met. Strategies. Plan of action refers to a coherent set of activities taken to accomplish a specific achievement. These actions are linked directly to the organization's purpose and builds on the organization's competencies and resources. Your strategies should define activities such as what resources and how resources will be deployed to achieve agreed objectives, how the organization will respond to changes in internal and external circumstances, planning actions that allow the identification and elimination of programs that limit mission impact and explore other programs that would enhance mission impact. Fundamentally, the most effective capacity building uses a combination of strategies from the action areas of skills, resources, infrastructure, collaborative partnerships, and organizational operations. Skills. Skills refers to the proficiency or capabilities of the organization. A starting point in examining organizational skills is to review the record of successes versus non-successes. In other words, clearly define what areas have they done well in, and what areas have they not done well in? Resources. Resources include technology, financial, and human resources. Such resources are critical to an organization's ability to build and sustain the organization as a whole. The amount of available resources is important. However, how resources are managed and maintained can determine the effectiveness and viability of an organization. The distribution, use, and management of available resources are fundamental to the effectiveness and viability of a nonprofit organization. Structure and operations. Structure and operations refer to the combination of leadership, organizational blueprint, functional coordination, and individual job descriptions, as well as the policies, procedures, and rules established to govern the organizational structure. In this sense, the organization shall examine things such as the structured activities that produce a service or product, organizational plans, establishing of priorities, management of resources, systems, and infrastructure, communication strategies, problem-solving and conflict resolutions, roles and responsibilities of staff, organizational beliefs, values, practices, and norms. Infrastructure. Infrastructure defines the physical and organizational structures that support the organization. In this context, we are referring to the facilities, technology installations, telecommunications, services, and other structures needed to effectively and efficiently run the organization. Collaborations and community engagements refer to linkages or establishing and developing community alliances and partnerships. This is a critical element of building the organization capacity because it's an opportunity for the organization to increase the resources available to the organization, secure new or additional resources, share information, learn from others, raise the organization's profile and visibility. Products and services. Organizations must demonstrate that their products and services are meeting goals and objectives, as well as utilizing their resources effectively and efficiently. As such, organizations must measure and evaluate outputs and outcomes to ensure products and services effectiveness. Monitor and evaluate. Monitor and evaluate is to comprehensively assess how effectively the organization is meeting their mission. Monitoring and evaluation is an ongoing process and should be conducted periodically to obtain ongoing feedback, make improvements, and help to identify future opportunities. Essentially, the monitoring and evaluation of the organization provides the means of addressing current needs, resolving problems more efficiently, and preparing for future needs. This proposed framework is a general consideration of capacity building that should be examined to improve on the effectiveness and viability of the organization. When exploring a specific organization capacity building framework, the organization should consider requirements that are in the context of the organization and should be drafted as such. Many scholars have recommended some basic steps to define an organization's capacity building strategy. Now let's discuss these steps. Define needs and resources of the organization. The first step in developing a capacity building strategy is to do an assessment of the organization's needs and available resources. The purpose of this step is to identify the organization's potential weaknesses and strengths. Review organization capacity gaps. Having determined the needs and strengths of an organization, the next step is to review all elements of the organization to determine and measure how available resources meet the needs of the organization or do not meet the needs. The purpose of this step is to determine a match or mismatch between needs and resources. Perform a systems and infrastructure analysis. Once the capacity gaps have been identified, the systems and infrastructure need to be examined. The purpose of this step is to determine whether the organization has the current procedures, processes, facility, and other systems in place to foster a capacity building process within the organization. Identify and create a capacity building plan. How the organization proceeds in identifying and creating a capacity building plan will depend on the results of what the systems and infrastructure analysis revealed. Such results will dictate how the organization will tailor the strategy based on the needs and organizational readiness to implement a capacity building strategy. If the results reveal that the organization lacks the capacity to proceed, then they may solicit technical assistance and/or collaborations from other local organizations. Monitor and periodically evaluate progress of the plan. As capacity building plans are implemented, it is important to monitor and periodically assess the progress of the plan. Monitoring and assessing progress provides ongoing feedback and an opportunity to make adjustments and/or improvements to the plan if necessary. These steps are recommendations on how an organization can proceed on developing a capacity building plan. When developing a specific organization capacity building plan, the organization should consider requirements that are in the context of the organization and should be drafted as such. Next, we will conclude our presentation by providing a few guiding principles on how to ensure success of the capacity building process. Capacity building seeks to add value to existing and future organizational activities. Capacity building is central to the sustainability of an organization, which is intended to guide an organization to a model of effectiveness and viability. In developing your plan, it is important to build on what exists to ensure that capacity building by the organization will be successful and actually achieve the outcomes that it plans to accomplish. Thus, successful implementation also depends on: build on existing efforts and best practices, focus on user needs, foster collaboration and partnership, enhance the sustainability of existing and future capacity building efforts by building awareness amongst decision makers. Facilitate the development of comprehensive, sustainable capacity building efforts that address all organization needs. Consult with target population. Involve the community. Build trust with the population served. Set realistic and achievable goals. By investing in the implementation of a capacity building strategy, an organization should see enhanced existing capacity building efforts, which should then lead to a more efficient and sustainable organization. That concludes our presentation on capacity building. Thank you for your participation. For more information about our upcoming webinars, please visit our website at www.tdmwebacademy.com or email us at info@tdmwebacademy.com.